Welcome to New Hampshire's Business. I'm Fred Coker. As a son of a minister, it struck me that surveys over a couple decades show that New Hampshire is one of the least religious states in the country. I'm going to dig into this a bit with my guest, but first, here are a couple surveys that show that trend nationally and in New Hampshire. Here at how often do you attend church or synagogue? And the choices are left to right: every week, almost every week, about once a month, seldom, never, no opinion. And then there's this: religious services among adults in New Hampshire. Again, left to right, at least once a week, once or twice a month, a few times a year, seldom, never, don't know. So the survey, religious, how religious is your state? And here's the score: New Hampshire 33, Mass 33, Vermont and Maine 34, and then in the South, Alabama, South Carolina, you can see the numbers, and then in the Midwest, Ohio, and out west, Oregon. Those are the numbers, and you can see there's a geographic tendency here. With me to dig a bit into this declining church attendance is the author of this book. And she is Michelle Dillon, who is also the Dean of the School of Liberal Arts at the University of New Hampshire. Welcome.
Thank you.
Nice to have you here.
Thank you, Fred.
Your book makes the point that religion plays a role in social change. So, with that in mind, as a sociologist, what has been fueling the lack of attendance at places of worship in New Hampshire and in this country? For decades.
For decades. Well, one of the big changes of the last 20, 25, 30 years has really been the decline in religious affiliation. And of course, social change, for the most part, happens on a fairly gradual or slow basis.
Yep.
But the data on declining religious attendance and affiliation has really been remarkably precipitous over the last 25 years or so. And you know, religion in the US has always been stronger compared to, say, Western Europe. In one sense, America is considered a religious outlier, so to speak. But what we see right now is this much more convergence with what we often refer to as secularization or secularism. But having said that, religion is always intertwined with lots of other variables, because sometimes people think, oh, people are religious, and that sort of is this compartmentalized identity. But religion is always intertwined with all kinds of other social aspects of life.
Right. One of the research report I read while preparing for this interview had a headline that read, "More Americans now say they're spiritual, but not religious." What does that tell us?
Well, it tells us many things, but one of the main things it tells us is that people have moved away from institutionalized religion. So the main traditions, particularly in this country, Christianity, has really seen a precipitous decline from, like, maybe even 10 years ago only. About 75% of Americans identified as Christian. Today that figure is now 60%. So in terms of social change, that's a pretty strong decline.
That is.
And what we see in part, there's many reasons why people have stopped either identifying as religious or actually engaging in some form of religious practice.
But still wanting to be spiritual.
Still wanting, and many of those who say they have no religious affiliation or don't go to church or any other place of worship, nonetheless pray and often actually express many traditional forms of religious belief. And then on top of that, we have the spirituals, those who say, I don't need institutionalized religious traditions to feel close to God. I find it being in the woods, particularly somewhere like New Hampshire, Maine, Vermont. Nature is a source of spirituality, and it gives them the solace that many others find through religious practice.
Now, take a look at this graph. This is the pandemic effect on attendance at U.S. religious services. 40% say they participated recently, either in person or virtually. 20% say they're attending less in person than before the pandemic. 7% say they're attending more in person than before the pandemic. And then 15% say they're participating virtually more often. So what do places of worship and churches, Michelle, need to do to attract people to their services? Is there a other than religion itself, or is there something else?
Well, that's of course a great question that you ask, and I think the answer to it is going to be multifaceted. But I think one of the things that we see in the research data is that many people, particularly younger cohorts, and they're the ones who are the least religious, people in not just in their 20s, but those in their 30s and their 40s, they do not want churches being involved in political activism. And of course, over the last 20 years and even over the last 10 years, the increased political polarization in the US has also become entwined with religious polarization. And so I think that would be one of the sort of the key lessons, is for churches to avoid getting overtly involved in having opinions on political issues. On the other hand, at the same time, maybe somewhat contradictory, young people particularly want churches and religious figures in general to engage on the issues that are of matter to them: climate change, extreme poverty, issues of war,
and
for
we will
example.
have to leave it there. We're out of time.
Excellent. All right.
Michelle Dillon, who is author of the Handbook of Sociology of Religion and also the Dean of the School of Liberal Arts at the University of New Hampshire. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred.
And if you missed part of this, you can go to WMUR.com, where it will be posted all this week.